Good afternoon. This is Charlie from Only PVC Pyramids. This is part of our continuing series on the fundamentals of pyramid science. This is part 6 of that series. And today's video is entitled Shape Power, the Research of Dan A. Davidson. This material is coming exclusively today from his classic work in the field called Shape Power, a treatise on how form converts universal ether into electromagnetic and gravitic forces and related discoveries in gravitational physics. Here's a picture of Dan up right now on the screen. Before we begin, I wanted to give you a brief background on Dan. Mr. Davidson has been doing research in gravitational physics, free energy systems, and electronic medicine for over 35 years. He has concentrated his research efforts in understanding the nature of energy and how it relates to the forces of gravity, electricity, and magnetism. Over the years of research, he has witnessed and collected many fascinating stories of well-documented bizarre incidents that point to a new understanding of science. He believes that the scientific community is in the process of developing a new paradigm in our understanding of nature, which will radically change the physical sciences. His degrees in mathematics and electrical engineering have provided a basis to relate orthodox science concepts to advanced experimental research. Mr. Davidson is a strong advocate of experimentation and always backs up his theory with actual working experiments and publishes experimentally verified information. Dan is one of the real pioneers, at least in the West, of this concept of shape power. There are others that we're going to be talking about. Dr. Ibrahim Karim from Egypt has developed similarly his ideas in a field that he now calls biogeometry, and we'll be talking about that later. And obviously the research that we are discussing in greater detail, that of Dr. Golod in the Russian pyramid research as well. But before we begin, I wanted to go back and review our 6 core elements of pyramid science. We've discussed the existence of the ether and the existence of torsion waves in previous parts of this series. And now we're going to get into the third topic, which is the ability of objects, including pyramids, to act as passive torsion generators. The remaining 3 subjects we'll be discussing in later parts of this series. But to begin with, let's review what Dan Davidson's concept of the ether is. Fundamental to understanding shape power is how the luminiferous ether interacts with matter. The basic premise is that all matter is simply a special case of the all-pervading universal energy filling all space, namely the ether. Over the years, the existence and understanding of ether has evolved as the basis for gravity and free energy effects at a micro and macro level. Laboratory experiments have shown that superluminal energy and information transfer have been effectively accomplished via etheric engineering, which effectively eliminates the theory of special relativity and its assumptions of a constant speed of light. In terms of the way Dan characterizes the ether, he states that my research and discoveries have led me to characterize the most basic attenuation of ether as follows. 1, a superfluidic particulate medium which pervades all space. 2, a medium which in its various modes is the building block of the physical universe. 3, a medium which in one of its modes is responsible for all the known grosser physical forces such as magnetism, electricity, electric charge, gravity, inertia, and the strong and weak atomic forces. 4, a medium which is controllable by our mind and can be manipulated by our thoughts. And 5, a medium which can be intensified and manipulated into any force or manifestation by the use of materials, shapes, and grosser forces. And that's that part 5 that we're going to be focusing our efforts on today. As far as Dan is concerned, shape power is the ability of multidimensional shapes to manipulate the local space energy. And in this treaty, I shall use the term ether to denote the local space energy field which permeates all space and time. The ether is a term and a concept that's not currently accepted in academic circles because the ether was supposedly disproved back in the early part of the 20th century by the Michelson-Morley experiment. Flaws in the experiment caused new experiments to be run which indicated the existence of the ether. However, the orthodox physics community has not accepted these results. Additionally, research into the last 20 years has brought the ether back in as a new guise called zero-point energy. I prefer the term ether because it connotes a much broader concept than ZPE. We are surrounded by natural and man-made shapes. From the remarkable geometry of the atomic and subatomic realm to the symmetrical beauty of flowers and seashells to the shapes of planets and galaxies, we find a kaleidoscope of shape which defines in an infinite number of ways our miracle universe. All natural shapes are the result of natural forces at work, and as such are tuned into these natural forces because they are part of these forces. And now for a really key term, so focus closely on this next paragraph. Every shape manipulates ether in some manner. A cone is an example of an infinite-sided pyramid, and as such will do many of the same things which a simple pyramid does. The American Indian teepee is an example of a near-conic shape which has many of the same energy effects as the pyramid. In this next section, we're going to go through Dan Davidson's description of shape power of a variety of different objects, and we're going to start, as he does, with the shape power of a point. The simplest geometric shape is a simple point, but a point is a mental construct because it has no dimensions of length, width, or height. To have a useful geometric entity that we can work with, we would be talking of a single etheric particle, i.e. a vortex in ether. This is simply a vortical flow of energy into the atom. The more complex the atom, i.e. with many subatomic particles, the more complex the flows in the atom's nuclear structure. On a macro level, for a complex atom, the flow will be oriented in a generally spherical pattern. In a simple atom like hydrogen, the flow will tend to look more like the lines of force around a small bar magnet. Most materials are made of much more complex atoms than hydrogen, so we can generalize and treat ether flow around an atom as generally radial, with flow either toward or away from center of the atom. If we look at the flows closely, we would find that these flows are vortexing or spinning in and out of the nucleus, as seen in figure 1411. Moving on to the shape power of a line, the next level of geometric complexity is the line. In this instance, we have an aggregated collection of atoms to form a line, i.e. from two or more atoms strung together to form a line. First, let us consider the etheric flows around two atoms next to each other, which would be the simplest possible line. The etheric flows in between the two atoms would either connect and ether would flow from one atom to the next, or the flows would repel and the flows would squirt out perpendicular to the radial line between the two atoms. The rest of the etheric flows would form a lozenge-type radiation around the combination of the two atoms. And Dan has given us a diagram here in figure 1421 showing the etheric energy flowing around two atoms, creating a simple line. By adding more atoms to the line, we simply elongate the lozenge of the radiation around the line, and the net result is etheric flows perpendicular to the line. This is illustrated in figure 1421, and when this is extended to a longer line, it's in 1422 as shown below. So as you can see in this picture, the lines of etheric energy are flowing perpendicular to the line itself. Now we move on to the shape power of two parallel lines. A pair of lines parallel to each other is similar to the two atoms next to each other. However, in this case, etheric flows in between the two lines would either connect and ether would flow from the atoms in one line to the atoms in the next line, or the flows would repel and the flows would project out perpendicular to the plane between the two lines. The net result of this configuration is a simple plane of etheric flows around the two lines. The proximity of the lines defines the amount of interaction, and again we end up with a lozenge-type energy configuration. And now for the next section, we get into the interesting part that starts to affect our pyramid analysis. It's called shape power of multiple intersecting lines. A large number of lines intersecting at a common vertex or top point would lead to a creation in the vicinity of the vertex, a magnetic field and an electrostatic field. Intersecting lines generate a flowing vortex of etheric energy. The magnetic field of a permanent magnet is also a flowing vortex of etheric energy as discussed previously. A set of intersecting rods will therefore generate a magnetic field because the etheric vortex flows at the intersection of the lines are in fact a magnetic field. This means that intersecting lines or rods should also generate magnetic fields. And now if we look at the figure up on the screen, figure 1451, this is a classic experiment that Dan Davidson had performed by his friend at the time, Joe Parr. As Dan explains in a video that I watched recently, Joe's wife, I think, was Chinese, and so they had a lot of chopsticks sitting around the house, and they had this styrofoam ball. So they were able to recreate this experiment using non-metallic instruments, a styrofoam ball and chopsticks. And this was actually the way that this field was measured, and it was done with what's called a tri-field meter, which measures electromagnetic fields. Moving on, a simple experiment was performed to test the hypothesis that intersecting rods would generate a magnetic and electrostatic field. These results are depicted in figure 1451 that we just talked about. Initial measurements were taken with a sensitive meter and a flux gate magnetometer. The experiment was a resounding success. Intersecting lines create a magnetic and electrostatic field, and this at the time was a major breakthrough discovery wherein shape power etheric physics predicts a previously unknown phenomenon. So now that we've seen that intersecting lines, such as at the top of a pyramid, would create this etheric field, Dan went on to look at the shape power of a triangle. A triangle is the connection of three lines at their endpoints. This takes us into three intersecting lines, and from the previous section, it's easy to deduce that there will be an ether concentration at each vertex of the triangle, and this is exactly what happens to the polarity flow inside the triangle from the center into each vertex. The lowest level of ether concentration in the triangle is where bisectors of each vertex meet in a common point called the median point. Ether flows from this point into the 3 points of the triangle, as illustrated in figure 1461. If the triangle is broken up into 3 triangles, almost all the energy is forced at the center, with a small amount at the outside vertices. If a circle surrounds the tetrahedron triangles, the energy is focused entirely in the center of the circle/triangle, so a circle overrides the effects of the intersecting lines. In a figure where there are triangles around the periphery of a circle, the entire energy of the figure is concentrated into the triangles. It is as if the triangles gather and focus the energy in the circle. The next section, we're going to look at a tetrahedron. And a tetrahedron here is essentially a three-sided pyramid. And we're going to see some very interesting results. A tetrahedron, this is the simplest of the Platonic solids, is made up of three connected triangles to form a three-dimensional figure with four vertices. The intersecting lines of the tetrahedron have a concentration of ether in a vortical pattern at the vertices, plus there is a large negative stress concentration of ether at the geocentric center of the tetrahedron, at about 1/3 of the height. And this is illustrated in figure 1471. The negative polarity at the center is a result of etheric stress drawing on ether from the four corners. So here we now have, for the first time, a three-dimensional object, and we're seeing that in addition to the vertex points around the edges, that the primary concentration of etheric energy is located in the interior of the pyramid. One of the observations which many researchers have found is that ether prefers to move in circular arcs or spiral patterns. Dr. Wilhelm Reich found that orgone moves in spiral patterns, and its constant motion is that of spirals. Victor Schauberger, in his groundbreaking research work on diamagnetic energy, also discovered that the diamagnetic energy moved in spiral and vortical patterns. If we apply this observation of ether moving naturally in spiral and vortical patterns to shape power effects, then it is reasonable to infer that the use of curved or spiral pathways to mold and guide ether will enhance the effects. And this is going to be something, this last paragraph is something we're going to be getting into more in the next couple episodes as we begin to explore the research of Russian physicist Anatoly Akimov. But to finish up the work of Dan Davidson on the energy of the spiral, one of the most common forms found in nature is the spiral, a two-dimensional figure, and its three-dimensional correlative, the vortex. Examples of spirals and vortexes can be found everywhere. One of the most common occurrences is found in seashells. Most shells have partial or complete spirals. Even the common fan-shaped cells are a vortex shape. The well-known chambered nautilus with its highly regular logarithmic spiral is often used to illustrate the spiral. Another well-known vortex format is found in patterns generated by trees and plants as their leaves form. The leaves usually follow a vortex pattern which is related to the Fibonacci numbers. The study of this natural phenomenon is called phyllotaxis. When a spiral is drawn starting at the center and around counterclockwise towards the outside, the local etheric energy is drawn into the center of the spiral and shot to the outside. When a spiral is drawn from the outside to the center, the energy is drawn from the outside into the tool and transformed into a rainbow of colors and energizes the locality. The energy field, as seen by clairvoyance, radiates out about 4 feet from the center of the spiral and is truly a rainbow of beautiful living colors. If spirals are connected by drawing a spiral from the outside to the center and then continuing the line from the center to the outside of another spiral, And doing this for several more spirals that are connected from the center of one to the outside of the next one, then energy is intensified tremendously. It is as if each spiral gathers more energy as well as intensifying the energies from previous spirals. Testing with sensitives also verified this most fascinating effect of the spiral as a shape power figure. If a person is at all sensitive to energies, they can readily feel the increase in energy intensity. Now, this last section we're not going to spend a lot more time on right now because we've got other things that we need to talk about before we get back to this. But you're going to find, and we're going to come back to this concept, that decreasing spirals that feed energy into each other, either as circles or spheres, is going to be a basic part of the geometry of the Russian pyramids as we begin to discuss this in greater detail. And this will be coming in part 4 of the series. Once we have finished this, we're going to be talking about the unique spiral geometry of the Russian pyramids and how that specified geometry works to increase the shape power of Russian pyramids. As always, I hope this has been helpful. Tell your friends about onlypvcpyramids.com and our YouTube page, Only PVC Pyramids. Please subscribe and tell your friends to do the same. As always, thank you for watching, and you have a great day.